Hey, everybody. This is Patrick Berry. Welcome to the Stoic Fellowship podcast. We're here with Mauricio Garita. I hope I'm pronouncing that somewhat correctly.
Yes.
Yeah, who runs a stoa in Guatemala that we're going to hear all about today. Um, and his experiences doing that and what has worked well for that group, and maybe some lessons to learn from what maybe hasn't worked as well. But before we get into all of that, hey, Mauricio, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity and also very well pronunciation. So thank you for that.
Well, yeah, I did speak Spanish for a while. You always wonder, speaking, like saying Spanish words in the US, whether to pronounce them correctly and or just do the American sort of like destruction of the Spanish language. But yes. Um, but yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and we'll talk about the group you're running in Guatemala as well. But first of all, maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, how you got interested in these things and all of that.
Very cool. First, how did I get into these things? I have been working for a long time, basically as a university professor in Guatemala and Spain. And also, I've been working in the finance sector as well as economic development. And the interesting part about this is that you start seeing, for example, in the process of going through what may be called as a rat race, trying to get to point A to point B and running so fast. The thing was in 2016, that's where the energy burned from my side. And well, what I would call is the same thing as Antonio Gramsci used to say, like when a crisis is when the past has you haven't let go of the past and the future isn't there yet. So that's a crisis. And I always like the definition of him. So I started this part of an existential crisis in 2016. And I have always read about philosophy. I have always read about different authors. Actually, I'm an economist focused in finance with a PhD in sociology. And I always wanted to study philosophy. But I don't think, I believe it was kind of frowned upon at the time. So it was kind of difficult to do that. So I used to grow in the university to the philosophy classes when there was a chance. And I remember that. I remember in 2016 that philosophy was important as part of the living, that it was before psychology and psychiatry, one of the main things to help with mental health. So I started researching on that and going through Sartre, Nietzsche, Heidegger kind of thing. And then I stumbled upon, to be honest, with Stoicism. The way I stumbled upon it started to go into that. I came to that because I was reading The 4 Hour Body by Tim Ferriss. So Tim Ferriss has something that mentions in the book about Stoicism. So that was kind of interesting thing. So from there, I went to read a little bit about Seneca. I always have been a fan of Seneca, and I started, what is this thing about Stoicism? And from then there, I started reading Ryan Holiday, and it was I really like this. And so then I went to Massimo Pigliucci and I interviewed him. So that was really cool. And then from then on, I just said, okay, perfect. I went to the classics, and I believe that in Kirin Dion from Epictetus is one of the best books that helped me in life. So I started from that, and then it really worked for me. It really worked for me on how to handle these pressures, these kind of things. How I was also in the process of becoming a dad at the time. So it was this kind of thing that everything changes in your life, and you don't have like a mindset on how to do it. And Stoicism was that solution to that. And from then on, I started to really delve in that, and it really has helped me a lot. And I said, well, it can help me. It can also help others. And the interesting part about this is that I also, during the process, I became in 2016 a coach, a multidimensional coach. And actually in 2024, um, with the APPA from the United States, this is the Philosophy Association, I became a philosophical counselor, and also based on Stoicism. So it has really been a ride, so like changing from finance and everything. And this moment shifted me into helping people and working with people and working with organizations, and this talent that we all have, and Stoicism has been the center of that. And I really appreciate that there are podcasts like this. There is this type of things like the stoa and all this information, because for me it has been really, really useful and it's changed my life.
Yeah, and I love the wanting to taking that as a motivation to try to find ways to help other people as well is wonderful. And so you got how did it begin? How did you start getting involved in bringing people together around this?
The main thing was how to teach philosophy, because the thing about this is that I always have like this idea that philosophy has been put in a drawer because it is so useful. Basically, on society, when you read Sigmund Bauman, for example, essays on the liquid society, you start to understand that there is something really, really interesting between handling this type of problems, the fastness, I would say, that life is going through right now. And Heidegger was also about this. He talked about Daizen and the importance of being present and the aspects of mindfulness, because we are expanding time and we're also expanding ourselves, being in different places like that. So understanding that was the thing of how to teach philosophy, not as a boring thing that is what everyone remembers, at least from school. It's kind of boring, and why is this useful and kind of thing, and how to teach it in a way that people find um, something that can be adjusted to life. So it began into that. As a professor, I began like trying to see what's the best way to explain this. I wanted to understand as a coach what were the difficulties, what were the things that we're handling, and try to see how was that. So the first thing was to be a beta group. I didn't know about the stores at the moment, so I started like getting people to teach. And also I saw like when we discuss about philosophy and when we discuss about these things, people started to create a process in coaching that really helped them. And it was faster, and I saw change faster than with the traditional methods. And that's when I understood that philosophy, like for example, let's take the dichotomy of control from Epictetus. The dichotomy of control is so important because usually nowadays we are like with this illusion of control. For example, the app, and it says like it shouldn't rain, so you're like, yeah, I control the weather, it shouldn't rain, but then it rains. So you start facing that. Or the I always say like the airport paradigm, that is the most interesting part. Like, you know, your flight is going to be there at 8:30, and then it's delayed and everybody like goes crazy. And I always sit on one of the parts near the counter, and I start thinking about like, why are people suffering so much of a delayed flight? It's part of the process, right? But if you don't have this dichotomy of control, that it was the path for happiness, then started that. So I started with that, like implementing this. I started also with a podcast, like trying to give this also in Spanish, because there were really, really good resources in English, but in Spanish there was like a gap. So that's the place where I started to see like, how can you take this to the person, that it doesn't feel like you have to climb, you know, like a mountain to understand that. Because philosophy was, and what we see about stoicism is that it's very simple, very direct, very easy to use. And it's hard because it's a hard pill to swallow, but then again it's very useful. So it started like that.
Yeah, and then tell us kind of where things have ended up. Like what tell us about the group that you have now, like how many people are involved, what does it look like? How do you meet? What do you have going on now?
Amazing. So we started the first group in 2021. That's when we made our application to Stoic Fellowship. But no, yes, it was 2021, but it was a complete and utter failure. And why it was a failure? Because, you know, like for others to learn, I can share my experience on how not to do a stoa. So the first thing about a stoa is recurrency. It's very important to have discipline when developing a stoa. At the beginning, we didn't have one. Like, you have to set a date, you have to create the date and create less friction as possible. Like in behavior economics, they tell you that I understood when you have a credit card and you tap it, right? Because you tap it and because you don't insert it like the old ways, it gives around 60% more of a chance of the person buying, right? Because you take friction off. So the interesting part is philosophy already has friction. It already has friction because everybody like thinks philosophy is not cool. It is only for those guys like drinking whiskey in a bar and in a campus such an Oxford, Cambridge, that type of thing. So if I'm on the bus or in the train, it's philosophy for me, right? So the main thing that we understood was discipline and less friction. Less friction meant like just making easy for people to attend. That's another thing we learned. We started trying to do the the classes in by Zoom, or obviously it was 2020, 2021, and it also didn't work. People need connections. I know we didn't at the time, we couldn't do it as possible, but connection is really important because people have questions, and even there is an after kind of discussion when you leave, when you're guiding a group. There is always this, and you see it in in these AA groups and also different type of groups. The importance of being there, of sharing. There's always a conversation after this draw, so you start like seeing this type of things. And usually we use, or another mistake was to end the meeting. And when you end the meeting, like everybody, ciao, in Zoom, you just put leave and there is no time for questions, no time for follow-ups, no time for reading people's body language and things like that. So we understood also that. And then after this type of thing on and offs and trying to get this, we came into the formula in 2024. So what's the formula we are handling that right now? The formula is like, let's speak about philosophy. So there is this great guy that is called Philip Kutzinger, and he owns the major bookshop in Guatemala, and he's a very fan of Stoicism. I believe we went on the same path very near. So first step, look for alliances and look for great people that will support you because you will need it. You will need it, this kind of thing with recurrency. Second part is that he offered the main stage of the bookshop for this process. And he was like, okay, let's take the main stage. And then we grab this. Then we settled for some hours. And we always made a flyer. The bookshop made a flyer. It's called Sophos. And it's in Guatemala. And they made a flyer. And the flyer was with a different kind of theme. So the thing is just come to listen here, like trying to create this. Let's talk about philosophy. So there is kind of a dissertation at the beginning that even Philippe has done one. I have done the others. So we talk about, like, for example, the last one was about um, how do you handle with loss, like losing your job, losing from the philosophical perspective. And we add stoicism into that. So we discuss about loss, the importance of loss, the context of loss. And then when you open the discussion, then everybody's seated and everybody starts asking questions. So the learning becomes recurrent. What we saw with this model, that at least it worked for us, is the interesting part that many people didn't understand the philosophy. So they needed this aspect first. The main thing was like trying to create a stoa, and it was like 5 persons. And from 5 persons, many of us, they got together, others don't. There's this type of life that gets in the way. So what we did was trying to amplify the base of philosophy by trying to get the message across. And the message across by teaching about different things. Like it was a class, we call it like a master class kind of thing. So we select the subject, send the flyer, and everybody's free to come. And from then on, we started receiving around 150 to 100 persons, uh, more or less. So they come to the bookshop and they start. And now that is like, we started in January with this methodology, and now we are going into our 9 month. Now you see recurrency, you see the same faces. You see that like there is a 30% group that is always there. And I always appreciate that because it's kind of the thing, and they start learning and they like, what book do you recommend? What thing? And then start like the question starts getting harder and interesting and things like this. So we started more into the basics of the stoa, right? Like creating this porch, and from the porch start like, hey, you want to talk about philosophy? Come right in, right? So that kind of thing like really worked for us, and it has been a really interesting thing. The usual methodology, I believe it wasn't effective for us.
Wow, there's a lot there. Okay, you covered a lot of great stuff. let's go through this. So you talk about some things that were key for this working. I mean, first of all, 150 people or so per session is a that's a largish group, I think, by most standards. Seems it's very common to be in the, half dozen to dozen kind of range of people for this sort of thing. So that's interesting by itself. I mean, clearly you've struck a chord there. You've struck a nerve. There's people who are interested in exploring these things. But for one, in terms of like the things that have worked well for you, you mentioned a sort of a discipline and um, and reducing friction and doing it in person as three of the main things that you emphasize there. Discipline, I think you mean by that like having some kind of a regular schedule. Um,
Mhm.
yeah. Was there anything else you meant by discipline, or was that?
Yes. One of the main things is to prepare well concerning the subject. I believe one of the strategies about discipline was always defining like something that the public wants to know and how to handle. So if you see that in the group there is loss, somebody lost their job, lost their kid, lost another person, like that is the type of thing you tackle for. We have talked about finance. We have talked about um, living every day as the last. We have talked about these things, but always like taking the room temperature with the room, right? Like always, there is this concept that I really loved when it was taught to me, also by a person that loves stoicism, and she always used to say like flip the classroom, flip the classroom. It's not about you; it's about everybody else. You know the subject. The interesting part is they don't. So the thing is, let them handle the questions and everything. You prepare yourself enough for there to be a lot of questions, and then you can handle the questions and answer. And if you are not, then there's always humbleness that you can go through and say, like, look, I haven't dealt with that, but then again, maybe somebody here has dealt with that. So the interesting part about discipline is first it starts with learn the subject, because if you want to flip the classroom, there's going to be a lot of questions, a lot of things like interesting things that happen, different references, books. So one of the main things is like read a lot. So that's the first part of discipline. The second part of discipline is I always call this in when I coach groups, I always this be predictable. What means be predictable is we like the world to be predictable. Like we like our coffee to taste the same. We like our food to taste the same. So the interesting part is we also like our experiences of learning to be the same. So the interesting part about this is like when you have discipline is same hour, same day, with a subject, always starting the same thing, always saying hello to everyone. Like these kind of things, like you follow this protocol. And I have learned that it's really important to shake hands with everyone, at least say hi. We always very happy. When you're leading a store, you're the first person that should be the happiest of all, like to be there. And that's also part of the discipline, of course, between that. And that's the other part, like this predictability. And the third part of the predictability is that I have a blog, and it's called Vivir Mejor. So in the blog, I always take a summary. I don't want to make any advertisement for AI technology, but I have an AI companion kind of thing. So it records the lecture. It's uploaded to the podcast, and then it's uploaded to the blog. And in the blog, you got the summary if you couldn't attend the meeting. So then again, there's always one thing at the beginning, like you prepare, and at the end, everybody has their notes. It's for them. It's part of the process of giving towards other. So the interesting part is like you handle this type of things, and it really helps a lot. Like what you would like, because what I say is like, look, guys, let's not use phones and anything. Just be here. You're going to get the summary next week. So no worries. There, and it's an amazing summary created by AI. So no worries about that. There's also, if you want to share it, it's going to be in the podcast, like all these things. But get yourself like in the digestion of Heidegger, like get yourself in the present moment and live there and enjoy this experience. And that's the thing. That's the discipline that it really helps. But it's discipline towards basically the leader of the store, and it's very important to have.
Yeah, that's really excellent. And you mentioned also reducing friction, which I think you talked about some there, just the predictability and the regularity of it, and making it, less of a kind of a cognitive burden to figure out when and where to be, and all of that. Um, uh, and you talk about the ways you run this group. I mean, it's definitely on a different scale, I think, than a lot of groups operate. And I'm curious. I mean, what's been your experience in terms of, you've discussed the pros and cons of, in person versus doing it over Zoom, and the need for that kind of personal contact. But there is a different way in which people can have that personal contact in a larger group, right? Like if it is six people sitting around talking, then like there can be a lot more of this sort of personal sharing and what's been going on with you, and you know, a different kind of intimacy than you can possibly have with 150 people in a room. Then there's a necessity for it to sort of be kind of audience versus speaker kind of oriented. So anyway, but on the other hand, you have this larger community of people, and there's, it's a little more kind of tribe sized, and the sort of the momentum that that creates, and all of the synergies that come from that. So I don't know if you could share some of your thoughts about smaller versus larger groups, and how you've managed to make a larger group, not just to keep it sort of personal, and not just like attending a lecture at a university.
Perfect. First of all, the main thing, and I like also to emphasize that, is to get support. Like the library support is amazing because they also have their clients. We're also like we share the same values, we share the same love for stoicism. So that helps a lot of track. So if you have a place that also believes stoicism, I don't know if it's a restaurant, a bar, library, or everything, that also you can join forces, because that's the thing that made this great. Like it's part of the thing. Like when we join forces and we believe in the same things, and we believe in what was the purpose of the store, and it's also a purpose that goes into my faith and belief, is trying to give to others what they cannot pay. That was the main thing. Like for example, I know we all need help, and the thing is, I always remember this about the Harry Potter films, that they always said like there's always help for in Hogwarts for where they need him. And the same thing, I believe that the Stoa has is its focus is to help others to be able. We always believe also in the power of one. We didn't expect this much. At least I didn't, and I thank God for that. The parties, I didn't expect the process of, like, we were just, the Stoa is going to work if one person goes, because we're trying to help one person. That's the main goal. So the main thing about this is, when you have a store, the the purpose is not about you. It's not about who's in front. It's about the other. That's the person about flipping the classroom. And if this in small groups and in larger groups, it's like, if this person is going through depression, this person is having suicidal thoughts, if this person, and you are the last person that person will hear, what is the impact you will have? That's the kind of responsibility that you should arm yourself at the beginning of a store. Like, you don't know what is happening in the room, you don't know, but you have to be able to know that the worst case scenario might be in front of you, and that's a person that really needs help and that really needs some advice. So you start from that, and you start from that, like tackling different things, because your presentation is going to be different in this aspect. So we start from that, and alliances. The second part, small group versus large group. One of the main things that I understood after having a large group is I always have a chair. So I have a chair and I create time after this talk. For what? For one-on-ones. That's very important. I truly believe that it's easier to share difficult things, and I have heard interesting things between that, and as a coach, at least for almost like 400 hours coaching persons one-on-one. The interesting part is that we are all in the same path. We are all having our different kind of sufferings, our different kind of hurt. And the path is, how do you create from the 150? There is usually like 5 to 10 persons that go into a one-on-one and create the space. And if it is not possible, there's always like, yeah, let's meet up for coffee. Let's eat something and discuss this with a little more time. Because again, the impact is not just at the store, is to try to be certain for a leader. And I always believe that from the AA programs about having a sponsor, and the one that leads is always the person that you were current. So you had to work on your community, and that was the main purpose of that. The main purpose was how to help the community as being the person I would have loved to have when I was having my crisis. Right. That's my main goal. Like I had to do it on myself, but it doesn't mean that somebody else has to do it by themselves. So if I can do that and I can change that, that's the purpose of this store. And that I believe is a good thing because also when people sharing the questions and sharing everything, they really shared experiences. For example, when we were talking about loss, there are persons that talked about having lost their kid, or and then there's another person in the room also in that. So you start like building community and say like this didn't only happen to me. And at least in for example in drug addiction groups or alcoholism groups or kind of thing, there's like this certain motto, but then there is different because how do you grieve? Like, is there a group for people that are unemployed, for example? That's not so common, right? So where do you see like people that have been like fired or that are moving between jobs or that type of thing, and you try to work through that taboo, right? For example, we also talked about personal finances. And yeah, everybody might have a debt. They are swamped with credit card debts and everything, but where do they talk to? And usually it's a store where it's a nice place to create these type of things. So that's the difference, like trying to engage with the question about how to do that part of help others with a bigger group. The one-on-ones have been the answer, and also being available for like a chat or like a voice message, whatever the person needs. And that has helped us a lot in the process. And also being a larger group is like discussing the hard things. And we always say like in the store, we're going to discuss the hard things. Hard things are being in debt with your credit card, losing somebody, being fired. Uh, there has to be a place where we can discuss these type of things in order to solve them. And there are very few places in the world where this is happening. So the stoas, I believe, are able to be this place of talking the difficult stuff in the world.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're perhaps in a better position to lead those kinds of discussions than maybe some Stoa facilitators, in that you have this training as a philosophical counselor, as a philosophical coach. Um, do you think that's part of why you're able to run a larger group sort of confidently then and sort of I don't know, for one, are you usually the one giving talks or are there other people that give talks? And this sort of thing you're talking about of doing one-on-ones with people, I guess you probably feel more qualified to do that with that training than someone who has started a Stoa just because they have an interest in Stoicism, but don't have that kind of background per se.
Leadership part, yes, I truly believe in Steve Jobs, connecting the dots kind of thing. And what I did is everything that I have or all my abilities that has been given to me, I give it to a store. So maybe there is a person that is really good at technology and about connecting things and can create a Slack team or a Discourse or something. It's like there are certain traits that one can use for the store and not only like see it as an interest, but all these professions that have great things. There are guys that maybe are amazing at marketing and they can make like this great content with things and try to explain, and that will help the community. It's like using your own resources. For my case, like I knew I had this. I have been a professor for like 15 years. So that was one of the things that I said, like, okay, I have to change this in order to adapt to my abilities. And that was teaching. The other one also was philosophical coaching. And I said, like, this was a new thing. Like I said, why there are people that have this question, how can I help them? So I create this one-on-one that again is based on the abilities that I have. And then I started learning from others. And the thing is like you always start learning, you always start because it's not the same as teaching finance or teaching. It's really difficult concerning the process about human beings and trying to do that and how not to give it like very dry presentation. Because the difference in the university is that the student is there because they are learning, they also are earning a degree, they have this motivation, they have paid, there are different resources. Now, when somebody comes to the store, they are really into the knowledge, just that, because they shouldn't be other like. So the other part is how to prepare yourself better into that. And I started like reading that, like how does Massimo Pigliucci does it? How does Ryan Holiday does it? How does this guy start? And like you get tips from them and start like saying like, yeah, they're just examples. They always reference a biography or something, or they use themselves as part of the example. So you start like being this as Brene Brown calls it, like a vulnerable group where you talk about your things like, yes, I'm going through a divorce, I'm going through a financial patch, like this kind of thing. So that helps a lot. And it doesn't have to have the abilities. It's just like creating rapport or something that you can say like, this guy is human and I'm also human, and we can share this grief together. The other part that is interesting about this is like you can also the reason why the group grew, I truly don't know. I think is something that, from my humbleness, I don't believe I am the reason. I believe the reason that underlies the process is that we all need something. We all need something to handle the pressure of the world right now. And after the pandemic, we became very aware of our own mortality and also of the velocity of life. And it really changed. And it really, I believe, changed people, and maybe not in the greatest of ways. So the sense of community was so important. So I believe that maybe the process is we are the excuse for creating that, and that's amazing. That's an amazing excuse because again, uh, it's so nice to have all these people getting together. But I believe is everybody's searching for something, and the point was like this is what we can offer from my humbleness and from our perspective and from our part. And again, I truly emphasize that because as Stoics is part of the thing, you have to take your ego out of the way, and you are there to serve. And to serve, you have to be the smallest one in the room. So you always, when you lead a stoa, you have to be the smallest one. You have to be the simplest one. You have to share, look, guys, like you shared at the beginning. Like I was going through a crisis, and I didn't know what to do with my life, how to prepare as a parent, how to handle things. So I was there, and I grabbed these books and I started to read. So it's not that now that I'm like doing this, I'm better, like the podium kind of thing. So you get off the podium, you like this, and you say like, yeah, I'm the same way. And I learned that from studying AA groups, right? Because they sit in a like in chairs around, and everybody that is there has had a problem. And the interesting part, like the same thing in life, right? We all have this. We all have experienced different kind of losses, of pain, like this. So the interesting part is how to create that, and that helps a lot. So to be honest, I just try to magnify my abilities, but I'm also working a lot on how to be better. I'm also working from one session to the other on how to be better. I'm always reading, trying to see what I can improve. I'm always trying to see also what else is there in life, and I create the cycle of what am I seeing in the streets, what am I seeing in my friends, what am I seeing in my community that should be talked about, and then that's the subject for the next conference, and that's the main thing. Now, to end this question, is like you have to. One of the main things that I understood is like putting a subject on the meeting really helps. So people say like, okay, yeah, I had this problem. We're talking about grief. We're talking about getting fired. We're talking about not knowing what to do with your life. We're talking about knowing thyself. So the interesting part is people are prepared mentally for the discussion, and you don't have to run through the branches in order to take a different subject. That's something I learned from that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I like what you say about like staying very humble and sort of keeping yourself sort of small, so to speak. That's good. And acknowledging that everyone, including yourself, has gotten there through, having crises and life being hard. And then that sort of common ground is, I think, a good place to start from versus trying to present yourself as somehow above the fray and you've got it all figured out and if only people could be more like you, they'd be happier. That egoism, I think, is very toxic to this sort of space. And there's plenty of that already in like self-help land. But it's nice to sort of like come at it from this more this foundation of sort of kinship and being in the same kind of circumstance as people who are looking for some guidance. But you talk about what people are looking for and what they need. Like maybe there's some loss they've had, or they have these different needs in terms of community, which to me raises questions about whether you've needed to establish any sort of boundaries, especially around things like people who perhaps truly need therapy versus philosophy. And if there are times when perhaps, I don't know if you've encountered this, that people are perhaps turning to a group like yours for support. I mean, there's definitely a role for support, but um, perhaps sometimes if people are in a certain degree of crisis, is there a need to recognize that and help them to get the right kind of professional help that they might need? Does that come up for you?
Yes, yes, of course. The part of this is understanding that pain is very different to everybody else, and how they're handling and how long they've been in pain. So that's the interesting part about life is how do you dimension things. And I truly understand that there is a part and there are great professions. We also have in the stoa psychiatrists and psychologists. That is a very cool thing, and I appreciate them for coming also. They're part of that. So they are also trying to learn how to create to grab philosophical practices in their work. So that's really nice. That there's a phenomenon that we didn't see coming. But when there's somebody for help, there's always this thing about like, look, I understand this, and you start like reading into that and say like as a coach, you have to know when you can help and when there is out of your hands. So the interesting part is when you go to that, you have to have this like context and everything for the person. Like, look, I believe that you can talk to this person. He's also here in the store. He's part of the club, so he might help you. Let him know and always guide the person to the place where they should be. Uh, then again, I emphasize that, and that's because I believe that of my Christian vision of the world is like you have to be humble, because if you're not humble, you say, yeah, I can help this person and I know how to help them, and then you may harm the person more than you can help them. So you got to be humble and say like, look, this is out of my league. I appreciate you coming here, and I appreciate this is helping those that are coming, of course, but I truly believe that there are other resources that could help you better than I can. And that's one of the main things, because you have to say like, you have to know your limits and your boundaries, and that's an important thing about stoicism that has taught me. And yeah, I can only go that far, and I cannot extra limit or extra create my abilities. There are just to certain aspects, and then there are other guys that are better at this stuff than I am, and I have to recognize that, I have to accept that, and I have to embrace that. And that's the beauty of life. There are another persons that are much better. And the other part about this is usually people ask me about the ego. So you're not better. I'm just saying like, I know there are better persons to lead the store in the world. Yes, of course they are, but I'm here. So that's the thing. I gotta do my best. And I gotta embrace the fact that when it comes to challenges with depression, with loss, with anxiety and everything, there are much better people than I am to handle this situation. So I always like refer them to that, but it becomes, then again, the main thing I would say is humbleness. Just knowing like, wow, this is something. Like, for example, if I do a great coffee, and I truly tell myself that, Patrick, I truly tell myself that I do a great cup of coffee, but it's not the same as the coffee shop down the corner. And although I try, it's not the same. So yes, I truly value the expertise and the specific, and always tell that like, I'm as a coach, I can get you from point A to point B and always work in the present toward the future. But there are certain things that must be unwrapped in the past. And that's why psychology and psychiatry are so important.
Yeah, and on this theme of establishing some boundaries, I wonder if you've had to deal with, I think when you're running a group, especially one of the size of the larger size that you deal with, sometimes you're going to have people in the group who are, I don't know, problematic in one way or another. That's just kind of the reality of dealing with human beings. Um, is that some is that something that you've encountered? And do you have any like suggestions or tips on how to deal with people who are, I don't know, difficult in different ways? I don't know, maybe they monopolize the conversation, maybe they have kind of like they're kind of projecting their emotional needs on the group in a way that is distracting and detracts from the experience of everybody else, or they kind of co-opt the whole thing and say make it about their pet theories. You know, like you can imagine various ways that people can derail a group like this, and aren't being very self-aware about it. Have you dealt with this, and do you have any tips on how to handle it gracefully?
Yes, yes, of course. One of the main things to understand is the hospital is for sick people. The groups are for person needing help. So everybody's going through suffering. The first thing you have to understand is this is not going to be an easy ride, just like, yeah, I'm going to speak and everything. No, when you're working with human beings, and also with in this context, like because we framed it as a stoa, so the stoa has a frame of philosophy and stoicism and how to help and how to deal with pain and all this. It's always going to be persons that need help, and when we need help, we obviously are in different paths of searching for help, and we have to embrace that. We have to embrace that that difficult person is not being difficult because he wants. Maybe it's the only way he knows how to live, right? And he doesn't know another way. So the interesting part is, yes, I can get frustrated and I can see that from my side and again from my ego and try to say like, look, this guy's talking too much and everything, or I can grab it after the store and just say, let me buy you a cup of coffee. I sense you have a lot to talk about and I really would love to hear it. Maybe he's a person that haven't been heard so much, doesn't know. Like, Patrick, this happens when you work with persons in an older age. I'm sorry because I try to like explain it to my Spanish English, but they're in an older age and they start to feel alone. So when you see that, they like to talk a lot and they like to show photographs and of the granddaughters and everything on this part. But then again, why? Because it's a sign of loneliness. So when a person starts like talking and you always like one part of yourself just goes into like, oh, why I want to change the subject and what to trade, and the person is that. But then again, uh, the vision of service, like, am I doing the store just like to get over the course? Like, yes, this is the class and everything, or am I going to stop and see, wow, this person is in real pain, or this person is really lonely? He wants to chat with somebody, and maybe I believe that can be enough. I believe that what can be that the main problem about social media, the internet, and the things, and Castells tell this in a really book about the era of and the other part is I was reading Donner about the manifesto against self help, and I also think that we are a community, and the problem is that we are not hearing ourselves. We are not lending our time to others. We are not taking our time just to take a coffee. It's the greatest investment you will ever make, like $5 into a person. But the investment is hearing the person, not the coffee. And when you hear that, we all need to talk. We if we have a beautiful marriage and we are yes, but maybe that's not the common thing. Maybe the common thing is that you go into that. And I always remember seeing this movie, the Joaquin Phoenix movie called The Joker, right? And he was searching for somebody for help all the time. Like he was searching and searching and searching, and he didn't got any help. So the thing that I always say is like I always believe David Goggins used to do this like test, and in his book he narrates this that he dies and then he meets God and God like tells him like look like there's this person that is great at running, great at doing, hurt everybody else, and he was like wow that's a great guy, and then God's like looks at him and says like yeah that was you, right? So the thing that I always measure is like when I die, would I get a list of remember that guy that was in the store? You didn't hurt him. Remember that you didn't. You could have, right? You could have helped. And when you go into that and bring it forward, then you say like, what is the purpose of life? Is this like this all consuming things? And I always ask people, what is your definition of richness? And they always like go into like, I want to be a millionaire to have a Ferrari. So you want to be a millionaire to spend a million, right? That doesn't make any sense. I want to be a millionaire to be free. And for what to be free? To have time for others, right? So that's the thing like changes you. And we're millionaires right now in that sort of sense. And we have to like give to others. So when you have difficulty in the group, it doesn't mean like the person is going to trample you because it's not the place for that. That's an ego answer like yeah this person is not letting me he had it against me. The thing is always, always, like it says, kill them with kindness, right? Always like be kind with everybody. You don't know what they're going through, so grab a coffee. Maybe the person will say no again, and you just insist the next time. I'm up for that coffee whenever you want. I'm buying, so it's free. You gotta make this time. So, and the person just tells you no again. Eventually, they will say yes, and that's the process of giving love to everybody. Like it's understanding that maybe all this type of thing is this, and when you work with kids and you work with elderly persons, you see that it's not that they want to do it, it's that maybe you're the only person that they can talk to, or they can behave like that, huh?
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of putting it. I really like that. And it reminds me of lessons learned as a parent in dealing with. I hate to compare people with children, but just the point of it being asking the question of where is this coming from, right? Like what is motivating? Where's this coming from? What's motivating this? Versus just seeing it, like you say, from some egotistical perspective, where it's like this is messing with my plans. This is they are being difficult or something. I mean, like it's like all right, but wait, what emotion is driving this? What need is driving this? And trying to see it from that perspective. Yeah, that's a very beautiful way of putting it.
uh,
Um,
and as you said, like you already know, right? That's the thing. When you are teaching, when you are a parent, you already know, right? So the act of service is focusing on the one that doesn't know. It's focusing on your kids. Like maybe, well, I also have kids, so the interesting part is like, yeah, how you don't know, like it rains because of clouds and evaporation. Like you go into that. So it's that is entitlement and that is ego. From the other place is let me see the world through your eyes. I don't know what you're going through, and the only part is listening. So you know that as a parent, the main thing one can do is listen a lot, and you'll have a lot of fun because it will challenge all your beliefs. Right? Kids are amazing with that. But the thing is also a lot of people like if you listen, then you can contribute to that process.
yeah, that's really great. I was wondering, you mentioned including the topic in the for a given meeting, so that people kind of know what you're going to be getting into for that. Something I've wondered about is in terms of choosing topics, and you mentioned choosing topics in response to what people are what's coming up in the group and what people are needing. Um, these things that are bound to come up are bound to come up sort of repeatedly, right? Like, loss is a recurring theme and whatever other sort of needs the people in the group may be having. Um, I've noticed that there's a definite tendency in these sort of meetings, these sort of groups to prize sort of novelty, right? To always want to be covering some new topic. Um, but part of me wonders whether there's a place for and a need for, revisiting topics and repeating topics and coming back to them again. And not like you've talked about it once and now you never need to think about it again, like the need for repetition in these sort of kind of central life questions. It's not just kind of like a intellectual curiosity. I kind of uh, I think there's almost like an anti-pattern that we've learned from sort of like the podcast model, where like every episode is a brand new topic, and we just sort of seek that novelty. Do you have any thoughts about that? Sort of, kind of the attractiveness of novelty versus the need for revisiting topics.
Oh, basically, yeah, yeah, of course. The main thing is when I first started writing, that was like my first passion during the university was to write. I asked a person that is a great writer, and he told me read the classics, right? So why? And when I started reading the classic, there are certain things that are timeless, right? Sorry, I freeze for a moment. Sorry, but then again, things that are timeless and that will be discussed now and forever. So, for example, the thing is how to unpack that different subject. For example, let's talk about why am I here, right? Like existentialism, like going from what is the purpose and what is the main aspect of purpose. So when you go into purpose, you can have purpose in society, disease, and what the purpose of life. Then you have individuality, like what is my purpose as an individual. Then you can unpack the subject in like 15 different aspects, right? So that's the interesting part. When you talk about, ego, you can talk about ego and money, ego and family, ego, and you can go through all the phases, right? So you just gotta grab like this important subject as part and just like trickle it down, and you can like say, okay, this year will be the year of the ego. So we will be discussing like 12 different ego situations, like ego at work. Imagine that. Yourself, you can have Marcus Aurelius as part to Seneca and how to handle this. And then you go into ego and money. So you can go into that also, ego and how to handle money and how Seneca was rich and all these kind of things. And then you go into ego and family, ego and raising kids. Uh, that is the thing. Like you can make a year about the classics and the topics, and it will never end. Or if you go into living with virtue, living with virtue with family, living with virtue with our partners, living virtue with our society. You can go into that. So I always found like first you gotta cover the first topics, like the general ideas. That's what we're planning, and next year we will into just working like this subject in this type of situations. So you just talked about that, and that really helps a lot. I believe novelty is always like trying to see, for example, I would love to talk about stoicism and technology. I truly believe that there is a win situation there, but it will perennial subjects are the things that really focusing on what we'll be discussing when we have 100 years, 200 years. So that is the main thing that I would focus on, not worrying about, the new AI augmented glasses and everything, right? Kind of thing. It doesn't matter. We are all struggling with the basic things that human life have been the same. And that is why these books are becoming classic, because the problems are the same. Seneca had the problems with Nero, the same thing as one can have with their boss, right? So it's not kind of different. So just it depends on the power that the boss have, right? Because that's the main difference. But then again, it's the same problem. So you just go into that, and I believe that creates more bindness into the group.
Yeah, yeah, well put. And unfortunately, you were cutting out a little bit there, but I think we got most of it. So hopefully people can be patient with some of the speaking of technology, it's wonderful and imperfect. So we uh at least we're getting to talk from Pittsburgh to Guatemala City. That's pretty cool. Um,
Yes.
yeah, so we're getting close to an hour here. There's a couple more things I wanted to ask you, and before we wrap up, and I certainly want to leave time for anything that is on your mind that I don't bring up. But before I kind of turn it over to anything else that you'd like to bring up, as a board member for the Stoic Fellowship, and this being a podcast of the Stoic Fellowship, the intention for the fellowship is to provide resources to people like you, and be a sort of a connective tissue among the stoas around the world. So I wonder, you mentioned having allies locally in starting a group, but one nice thing about the technology that we have these days is that we can leverage these allies that we have remotely. We our allies around the world. Um, and the Stoic Fellowship website and such is meant to be that. And I wonder to what degree that has been useful to you in starting a group, and if there are other sort of like things that on your kind of wish list of what you might want from the Stoic Fellowship going forward that would help you in running your group.
Interesting. Interesting. Mhm. Perfect. So I did a change just to get better internet. So again, main thing about the resources. I truly believe that one of the main things that the store has are the experiences, the really interesting things. There are different aspects that one can learn, one can reach out. For example, I have followed Stoa Madrid, that I know the person leading that is part of the board. And there is an interesting part. There is always better practices. Like the web page is really interesting. Uh, the other circumstance that is to try to get the best out of others. Like you're not the first one doing things, and I'm not also the first one. You have also experience, and so you can go into that. You can go into the podcast. You can try to see what is my fit, right? What is my place in this process, and what would I like to do, and how I can make it better. And always look for best practices. Stoa has this, but also there are other resources like work on your presentation skills, work on your message skills, work on your soft skills. Like this is a great place for improvement. Like Socrates used to say, like you got to be better, and that's the part also that you can get into that. So the other thing is like, look, from what you heard today, one of the main things is like, yeah, I would practice teaching more. I would practice like presentations in the mirror. Like I will do this like in this. So that's the interesting part. And you always say like, if you search for somebody that is good in technology, for example, if you're good in technology, and I would say like, yeah, what are the best practices that you have that maybe help? That's how I ended up with AI note taking, right? It was like, yeah, you can do it that much easier, and you know, kind of provide the service to others, right? So yeah, that's kind of the thing, right?
Yeah, that's the hope is to leverage each other that way and then learn from each other this way. Hopefully you can still hear me. We're still having some connection issues, but so it goes. Yeah, I think those are the main things I want to ask you about. I guess before we wrap up, I would love to hear if there's anything that's kind of on your mind or you'd like to share that I didn't bring up or anything else you'd like to talk about.
Yes, very interesting. There's also one of the main components, for example, I always seen like Stoicism, and it's reached out by Buddhism, and always this part of spirituality or Christianism, or I would think that there is a nice mix into that also. There's part that, for example, has to be called about the importance of nature in life, the importance of spirituality. That's one of the subjects that we don't talk about that much, and I believe we should. It's an important subject, belief and trying to be better and trying to understand better practices from others and trying to do that. Uh, I always support the idea of reading Emerson because he was into this. He delved into different uh, spiritual practices, and he grabbed things from everybody else. But it's important. I truly believe there is something for the mind and something for the spirit, and it's something that Stoicism talks a lot about, and nature. And the part of that is you have to get into the tough subjects, and it's going to get bumpy, yes, but that is the place for that, right? When you're ready to handle different conversations from spirituality, from how is it life right now, what are the difficulties and things, that is important thing. And I truly would say like, dare to talk about the different subjects, dare to talk about the the aspects, dare to talk about anxiety, dare to talk about depression, dare to talk about addictions, dare to talk about, because you know what, there are not a lot of places where we can talk about this. So the thing is that Stoa can be, would I be the person to handle that? Basically, I just don't know. I'm going to give it my best, and I'm going to know where my limits are, as we have discussed. I'm going to know where, yes, this is a psychological thing, but let us understand pain. Let us share pain. Let us, the Stoa be a place where you can like, exhumate your own pains, and like say like, yes, that's the purpose of creating this. The purpose of the porch was not to say like, look at me, I'm at the porch and I'm a stoic and everything kind of thing. It was the purpose of helping. If one gets the life of Seneca, why would have he written books? Why he wrote letters to Lucilius? If he was making a lot of money, he was rich, he was, so why was he doing all that he was doing, right? And then you go to Marcus Aurelius. He had all this power, all these great things, all this everything, but why was he so conscious about his decisions, right? So you start like seeing that the whole purpose of stoicism is helping others. and always to serve. And if that binds with your spiritual practices, because as I stated, like it binds with what I believe, it's there are certain things that I learned from my own thing, from my own experience, from Christianity. And I always say, like, yes, Jesus this does this, and he talks to the person, so talks about a certain subject. Maybe I can grab that. Like, don't disconnect. Make the storm more integrated into what you are, because there is like there was an office I went, and there is this Japanese like kanjis, I believe they're called, and the thing is, it says like, what did he say? I asked to the person in the office, and he says, give personality to the position, right? And I always say, like, give your personality to the, like, that it feels like Patrick will be leading Pittsburgh, for example, and maybe 5 years from now it will be another person because you moved or something, right? But they will always remember the star as guided by Patrick, the star as guided by Mary. The star. So that's the interesting part about also being vulnerable. And I always say, like, read Brenda Brown, be vulnerable about this when you're leading a store. Having problems just make it easier for other persons to see that you are not a demigod and trying to be, and you know the solutions to everywhere. We also, I also cry. I also have my doubts. I also have my crisis. I also have my challenges. Yes, I'm a human being, and it doesn't mean that if I'm at the center stage, it doesn't mean that I'm, like part demigod. No, it means that basically I'm just trying to teach what helped me in a very humble way, and I'm going to be better tomorrow because I'm working on that. But again, it's okay to express yourself, because it's also for you. When you put your problem right in the subject, then people start like giving you ideas, and they feel also, because help can come from any place, and that's the main thing. So what I would say is, be more free into taking all of you into the store, like all of you. You're a military vet. Well, that's amazing, right? There's a lot of experience there. There's a lot of things. If you're a doctor or an MD and you are helping, there's something you can do. Your profession is important. Your spirituality is important. Your background, your knowledge, your things. They're always so important. So when you give personality to your store and you say, like, the Patrick, he has the skills, and you take it, and that works so much. And I truly believe that's a great path for this.
I love it. I love it. Very well said, and I appreciate all of that. So, hey, Mauricio, thank you so much for taking some time to talk with us, and to share your experience, and your the pearls of wisdom that you've that you've
Thank you. Appreciate it.
garnered from running this group. And I wish you lots of luck with the group, and hopefully we get to speak more in the future about all of this. There's more to say, no doubt. Um, I guess before I let you go, is there, if people want to know anything more about you or your group, is there a place you would point them to?
Yes, yes, please. It's called Vivir Mejor. So it's like vivirmejor.substack. We're writing a Substack right now. You also can find Vivir Mejor in every podcast platform, Amazon type of thing. You can always write there. There's also my own Instagram that is called Mauricio.Garita. So you can find there. We are starting to create content also in English. So don't be afraid. Like at the beginning, if you go to these pages, there's only Spanish. Well, if you're learning Spanish, as Patrick wants to do, so that's a great resource. We hope so. But then again, we're turning also into English. So we're developing my Medium page that is also at Mauricio Garita. And we started to do all these aspects for sharing. So thank you. We also we developed a book. We're launching a book right now that is called 20 Lessons in Stoicism and Finance. So it's also something that we will be sharing on this media, and also 10 Stoic letters to my kids. That is also like kind of how to teach Stoicism to kids and how to handle it as part of the thing. So there are upcoming projects also in the process. And for everybody listening, I'm very grateful for this experience, also for being part of the store, for getting interviewed here. Patrick, thank you so much. And if there is anything out there that I can help with, always write in a DM in Instagram, and I always answer. And the whole purpose is to serve and to be better, and to remember that we are all in our path to dying, right? And And the main thing is that we don't know the date, so the best thing we can do is preserve each other.
Yeah, and for anybody struggling to spell vivir mejor, which means to live better, we'll put a link in the show notes. That'll make it easy for you. So,
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Mauricio, thank you so much, and have a great day.
Thank you.